Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's afternoon devotional and Bible study for June 24th, 2021. Sorry that this is coming at you guys so late today. We had a meeting about possibly running campfire at the end of the summer, and we were working our way through government guidelines and location things and just how it might be able to happen. And an hour meeting ended up becoming a 2 hour meeting. So I'm really sorry for coming at you guys so late. And then I had another unexpected thing pop up. So I'm really sorry that I'm late and that I didn't give that a little bit of foreshadowing that I am going to be running late that I normally do. So I apologize to you guys for that. Right now, I'm coming at you from kind of our office room slash kind of nerd zone. So you got a couple of the board games behind. All my comic books are like right there, and then my action figures are just a little bit above there. And right there, you got the Speaking Jesus action figure. Yeah, that's right, you do. Anyways, so yeah, let's focus on the Bible study and let's focus on what we're actually here for. So today we're going to be reading through Ezekiel chapter 38. And before we get to that, we're going to read Jesus is Calling for today. So without further ado, let's jump into Jesus is Calling for June 24th. Hold my hand and trust. So long as you are conscious of my presence with you, all is well. It is vitally impossible, it is virtually impossible to stumble while walking in the light with me. I designed you to enjoy me above all else. You find the deepest fulfillment of your heart in me alone. Fearful, anxious thoughts melt away in the light of my presence. When you turn away from me, you are vulnerable to the darkness that is always at work in the world. Don't be surprised by how easily you sin when you forget to cling to my hand. In the world, dependency is seen as immaturity, but in my kingdom, dependency on me is a prime measure of maturity. That was based off of 3 different sections of the Bible. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Isaiah 41:10. For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. Ephesians 5:8. And then lastly, find rest, O my soul, in God alone. My hope comes from him. He alone is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken. Psalm 62:5-6. I really like the end of that devotional there. The last 2 sentences. Don't be surprised by how easily you sin when you forget to cling to my hand. In the world, dependency is seen as immaturity, but in my kingdom, dependency on me is a prime measure of maturity. And I really do agree with that sentiment. A lot of times, the world is like, you don't need nobody, you don't look out for nobody, don't trust nobody, all of that jazz, right? And it's very immature. All the successful people, and one of the keys to success is like delegation, leaning on others, trusting others. Like, it takes a community to raise a child, is that old saying, or it takes a town to raise a child. And when you try to do everything your own and not lean on anyone ever, like, it's very immature, and it's that I'm pride, I'm an alpha, and I'm a boss girl or boss woman or whatever that term is, and it's just like, yeah, you are trying to do everything on your own, and it is kind of immature to think that you have to. And it's sad because it shows like hurt and all of that sort of stuff. But when we learn to trust, and we're brave enough to open ourselves up and be vulnerable with those around us, and we are able to trust and be dependent, especially on God. When we are man enough or woman enough to admit that we cannot do things without God, that we can't do that we are powerless in the face of our sin without God. That takes real maturity. That takes real strength, especially in a world that screams it as weakness. Because so many times we don't want to be seen as weak or immature, and we there's so much posturing that happens in this world. So much. But I don't think I really started to mature until I gave everything up to God. When I was like, all right, Lord, I need to lean on you to help me through this. That's when maturity started to kick in. So, yeah, I really like that sentiment quite a bit. So now we're going to open up our Bibles to Ezekiel, and I encourage you to read along with me. Ezekiel is spelled Ezekiel, Ezekiel. We're going to start reading through chapter 38. I'm reading out of the New Living Translation. There is... So yesterday we talked about a valley of dry bones. We went to the graveyard at the bottom of a big hill, in a valley, if you will, of buried bones, to talk about a valley of dry bones, and how God still brought everything together. What was impossible, God made possible, and it was a lot of foreshadowing to Christ. And then the second part of that was these two nations, Ephraim and Israel, that were on these two different sticks, and then God's like put them together and say they are one stick in God's hands. And that was the symbolism of how God was going to reunite, restore these two nations, and that they saw all these differences among each other, but in God's hands they weren't. Those differences were kind of meaningless, and they were actually one people. Once again, a ton of foreshadowing towards Christ in the New Testament and his role in our lives. The one thing, I think I misspoke yesterday, and I said you can't win heaven. I meant to say you can't earn heaven. There's nothing that we can do to earn heaven, was one of the things that kind of came out of that. Anyways, so now we're going to start reading through Ezekiel chapter 38, a message for Gog. This is another message that came to me from the Lord. Son of man, turn and face Gog in the land of Magog, the prince who rules over the nations of Meshish and Tabel, and prophesy against him. Give him this message from the sovereign Lord. Gog, I am your enemy. I will turn you around and put hooks in your jaws and lead you out with your whole army, your horses and charioteers in full armor, and a great horde army with shields and swords. Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya will join you too, with all their weapons. Gomer and all its allies will also join you, along with the armies of Beth Togarmah and the distant north, and many others. Get ready, get prepared. Keep the armies around you mobilized. Take command of them. A long time from now, you will be called into action. In the distant future, you will swoop down on the land of Israel, which will be enjoying peace and recovering from their war. And after its people have returned from the lands to the mountains of Israel. You and all your allies, a vast and awesome army will roll down on them like a storm and cover the land like a cloud. This is what the sovereign Lord says. At that time, evil thoughts will come into your mind, and you will devise a wicked scheme. You will say, Israel is an unprotected land filled with unwalled villages. I will march against her and destroy these people who live in such confidence. I will go to those formerly desolate cities that are now filled with people who have returned from exile in many nations. I will capture vast amounts of plunder, for the people are rich with livestock and other possessions now. They think the whole world revolves around them. But Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish will ask, do you really think the armies you have gathered can rob them of silver and gold? Do you think you can drive away their livestock and seize their goods and carry off plunder? Therefore, the Son of Man, prophesy against Gog. Give him this message from the Sovereign Lord. When the people are living in peace in their land, then you will rouse yourself. You will come from your homeland in the distant north, and your vast cavalry and your mighty army, and you will attack my people Israel, covering their land like a cloud. At that time, in the distant future, I will bring you against my land, and everyone watches. And my holiness will be displayed by what happens to you, Gog. Then all nations will know that I am the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord asks. Are you the one I was talking about long ago, when I announced through Israel's prophets that in the future I would bring against my people? But this is what the sovereign Lord says. When Gog invades the land of Israel, my fury will boil over. In my jealousy and blazing anger, I promise a mighty shaking in the land of Israel on that day. All living things, the fish in the sea, the birds of the sky, the animals of the field, the small animals that scurry along the ground, and all the people of earth will quake in terror at my presence. Mountains will be thrown down, cliffs will crumble, walls will fall to the earth. I will summon the sword against you on all the hills of Israel, says the sovereign Lord. Your men will turn their swords against each other. I will punish you and your armies with disease and bloodshed. I will send torrential rains, hailstorms, fire, and burning sulfur. In this way, I will show my greatness and holiness, and I will make myself known to all the nations of the world. Then they will know I am the Lord. May God add a blessing to the reading of His Word. So, once again, this has happened time and time again. And I don't know why, but I think this is the first time that I've kind of had this little bit of revelation here is God's people, they've gone through a lot to transform, to change, to become who they want to become. And God's welcoming them back, even though they're not made perfect yet. They're coming back and they're resettling their land. And they haven't built up the walls and everything like this. And like all the other nations that have become desolate, they look at them and go, well, they're weak. And we can totally take them over. I mean, like, they don't even have walls to protect them. The confidence and the arrogance. And God sees that. He knows what's in their hearts. And He protects the people. He protects His people. He is that wall of protection. He says, yes, you're going to do all of this stuff. You're going to be descending like a cloud. Hey, Jesse, welcome. But God's like, all right, cool. I'm going to step in and I'm going to be their defense. when we make strives to start to improve our lives, to break free of addictions, to do all these other things, we might do a lot of that inner turmoil, and that purification process can be really painful. We might say bye to some friends, we might say bye to some jobs, we might change locations, and we do all of this stuff to try to start that journey. And as we're on that journey, and we might be even feeling like we're thriving, then all of a sudden people will come up. They'll enter into our lives, and they will try to steal, destroy, and bring us back down. That road to recovery sometimes can have the enemy at the gates, seeing a weakness and trying to attack it. And we can focus so much on trying to protect that we lose sight of God, and then it becomes our downfall. Or we can just focus on what God's going to try to do and move forward, keep doing that, and trust that God's going to protect us along the way. And I'm not meaning like sickness, like the church created hospitals. We can pray for God to intervene and all of that jazz, but I don't think this is at all talking about not going to hospitals. But as we make that metaphor that we've been seeing throughout Ezekiel about making those choices to purify ourselves, and how painful that can be to go from like someone that's committing adultery and caught up in like serial dating and so on and so forth, and or just like in this love of money, to cut that out of your life and kind of refocus. It can be really, really tough to break some of those things. Extremely tough. And then as we start going forward, the enemy's going to try to attack. And God's going to protect us. That's what I see in there. We can look at everything else that's going on. There's this other metaphor with Jesus walking on the water, and one of the disciples gets out of the boat and starts walking towards Jesus on the water. And then he takes his eyes off of Jesus as the waves rise up above his head and crash down. And then he begins to sink, and Jesus reaches out with his hand and pulls him back up. And in those times when these enemies, when Gog thinks that we are weak and tries to attack us, we can stay focused on God, and he will do what he needs to do to protect us. Even though we know that they're coming down like this cloud to cover the city. Depression is often seen as this cloud as well. And people are great at making other people feel anxious, depressed, and just full of anxiety. So I like that metaphor and that imagery. Don't think that's necessarily what the imagery they were going for was, but it seems fitting to me right now. But God will protect us if we can stay focused on him. So yeah, here's this other battle, this restoration, and there's that talk about in the future, and God knows their hearts, so it's interesting. The second big takeaway of this is God knows the hearts even of our enemies. So there's a lot of times when we might look at someone and not really understand who they were. Especially after 9/11, there's this giant panic of, anti-Muslim sentiment. And I think one of the things that we can pull out and we can extract, whatever that word is, we can get from this is God knows the heart of even the enemies. So those people that are super against Christianity, in some of those horror stories and those one-off stories that we've heard, that was stoking the fires of fear, is that God knows them. He's known them since before they were born, and as they grew into the men and women that they are. God knows them. God knows their heart, and he loves them. And there's that bit of a reminder in there, and to trust that God's going to look after it. And if we focus on God and we live our life like how God wants, then He'll use us. He'll guide us. He'll direct us. And hopefully people will get saved. That's what I got out of today's message. Tomorrow, we're staying with Gog a little bit because I looked at the titles of some of the things, but there's also more hope for restoration. There's more hope coming down that line. So let's pray. AJC, awesome Jesus Christ, thank you so much for all the ways that you love us, guide us, direct us. Help us to see your love for us. Help us to see how you care for everybody, including our enemies, Lord, those who wish us harm. And help us to move forward and stay focused on you, especially after we've gone through that powerful purification process to start that process of becoming like drug-free or whatever it is. Lord, help us to move forward with you. And as those dark clouds come, whatever they are, as the enemy tries to descend on us like that dark cloud, help us to stay focused on you as you protect, lead, and guide us. And I thank you for this message of hope despite this bad situation. And I thank you for knowing us, caring for us, knowing where every bone in our body goes, and then how many hairs are on our head. You know us so intimately, Lord. Thank you. All right. Have a great day. Thanks for joining once again, Jesse. And hopefully the new home is going great. Definitely, I don't know. I have thoughts, but not worth sharing out here super publicly. But yeah, I hope that everything's going great for you. Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. Sorry that it's coming at you once again so late. But hopefully it's for a good reason. So I'll see you guys tomorrow with chapter 39. Have a great day. God bless.